Have you ever felt like you've been pulled in 10 directions at once? Namaste, Satyaru, and hello, and welcome to this week's episode of The Crossroads of Culture. Today, we'll be talking about that very thing. Kind of piggybacking off of last week's episode about discipline, this week we'll be talking about priorities and how do you know what to prioritize and when? How do you figure out what to value as important in your life and how to make those decisions? So let's jump into today's episode. So, first, let's just talk about all of the different things that you might need to prioritize in your life, just to kind of set the scene. If you are an international student or an expat or something like that, and you've come to the US, or even just as a normal human being living our daily lives, we have a lot of things to prioritize. We have community, we have career, we have our own personal needs, our own family needs, family if your family is back home and how to connect and communicate with them, friendships and socialization, career networking, personal spiritual practices and spiritual community. There's so many. I mean, I could go on and on of things that need to be prioritized in life. And it seems like as we get older, we just make more and more commitments. We get busier and busier. And sometimes we don't know how to say no and what's the most important thing to say yes to and how to set those boundaries and all of those things. And this is something that becomes increasingly important as you expand in your own life, as you grow in self-development, and especially if you're pursuing your studies and your career in the US, you need to make the most of your time and the opportunities that you have here, but also still make time for rest and make time for people back home and even just cultural traditions and so many other things. So let's just kind of work through each of these topics and hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll be able to kind of have in your mind what are the things that are your highest values and highest priorities and things that you might need to start saying no to moving forward or what your kind of perfect life might look like, what you envision your perfect life in this moment to be like. So, first, let's talk about why prioritization can feel so difficult. Like I said, sometimes we just have too many options, too many good things that we want to say yes to everything, and everything looks like the perfect opportunity. And we might have the fear of missing out with our friends. We say FOMO, or so many other things. You might think that if I say no to this networking opportunity, then what if that doesn't help me to advance my career, but instead it's making me regress, or I lose a really good opportunity, or so many other things. So that's the first thing. Sometimes it's too many good choices. We don't always have to avoid, bad choices or say no to things that might be obviously negative, but even saying yes to things that we're not supposed to can be a negative in our life. The second would be the cross-cultural pressure. So you have expectations from family, from your community back home, and your own personal goals, and you have to figure out how to balance all of those things. How do you meet other people's expectations in a healthy way, in a way that honors and respects your parents and your community, and how do you also continue to make time for yourself? And then the last point that we have here, we'll dig a little bit more deeply into just because it's even more of a cross-cultural topic, but there are cultural differences in values. So in South Asian culture, you have the collectivist mindset or the group first identity. And then in Western or individualistic cultures like the United States, you will have the individualist mindset or the me first priority. And so, how this breaks down is if you come from one of those collectivist mindset communities, then your identity is tied to your community. Your decisions are made not based on what you want to do, but as a family, as a group, as a community, with everyone's well-being in mind or everyone's happiness and expectations in mind. obligations to your community or to your parents can outweigh your own personal desires. For example, you could be attending a cousin's wedding, and that might take personal priority in your life over studying and being able to pass your exams to come to the US, even though that might be your end goal and the thing that will help you to progress in your life and to meet the goals and even the aspirations of your family. Still, the cousin's wedding will take higher priority because it's family. It could be even someone that's a more distant relative, but just to save face in the society and to show your own respect and love for your community, then going to a social event might have a higher priority in your list than something like personal study or career. Harmony and reputation matter. So again, saving face is like protecting your family's honor, I guess you could say. And saying no can feel disrespectful and bring shame to your family. So people tend to say yes more readily to a lot more things. And sometimes they don't come through on those commitments that they've made. But in an effort to just keep the peace, then and to keep your reputation strong, you might say yes more easily, even to things that you don't want to say yes to. Um, this kind of ideology does create strong community bonds and deep sense of belonging and shared responsibility within the community. That's one of the positives. I think there's such a high rate of depression and loneliness and mental health issues in individualistic cultures and societies. And I think that is due to a lot of these kind of ideas, as beneficial as being individualistic can be for your own personal gain and your own personal life. It also takes away the joy of being in community and learning from others and, um, that togetherness and belonging that we all want to sense and we all want to have. So that's something that is a positive, I think, of this type of mindset and something that people from Western cultures can definitely hold on to and try to value a little bit more highly in their lives. And then the last one is just the challenges that you might face if you come from this perspective. It can easily lead to burnout because you're saying yes a lot. You can lack personal boundaries, and that will also add to your own personal burnout and struggles in even your relationships with people that you care about and people that maybe you're not as close to. And it also brings a lot of difficulty in pursuing your own individual goals and the dreams and purposes and plans that you have for your own life. It makes it harder to make decisions just for yourself, but instead you kind of go along with the group or with your family or just your community's mindset, even if it's not what you think is best for you. Um, and then for the individualistic society or community, it's the me first mindset. So your identity is tied to your own personal achievement. Success or failure is my responsibility. Personal goals are prioritized, so career advancement or study deadlines may take precedent over family events. This is something that might be shocking to someone from a collectivist culture, but it's very true. So often in Western communities, this is kind of a generalization because even the US is multicultural and divided up into many different subcultures within the US. But as this is talking about in the individualistic mindset, it's true that if you have a big work conference or something that you have to prioritize or a deadline with work, it's very likely that you'll miss family events, birthdays, or family reunions, even. And that makes it a little bit less likely that you'll have as close family and community ties. And you might feel more isolated and alone without even realizing it. You just make decisions because this is what I want to do, this is good for me, and I make my decisions based off of this. You don't even think about someone else because that's just how you were raised and how it's ingrained in you, around you, in the culture. Boundaries are valued very strongly in individualistic cultures, so we're a little bit more private as people, potentially. Saying no is seen as healthy and self-care and not disrespectful. So we don't have problems saying yes or no to invitations. Of course, people pleasing can be a personality trait that runs deeply within certain subgroups or subcultures or just people and in general. And I used to struggle a lot with people pleasing, but yeah, we still don't have a problem of voicing our opinions and what we want generally, especially as you get older and you mature. Then you're just like, hey, no, sorry, I can't come. I'm doing this. I'd love to meet up next time. Or if you don't want to meet, you just don't make plans and you don't meet. So we're a little bit more free with expressing our own opinions and what we really want to do or don't want to do, and those kind of things. And then some of the strengths to this would be that it encourages independence, personal ambition, and a clear sense of self, that we develop a clear sense of self because we've really reflected and thought about who I am, what do I want to do, how do I pursue those things, and how do I prioritize those things. And that can lead to a lot of even personal success. But again, the challenge might be that you feel disconnected from your family, from your community. It can create a lot of loneliness, isolation, or this feeling of guilt for disappointing other people because you're making decisions that you feel are best for yourself, but you still feel the weight of trying to please other people and you don't want to disappoint them. So, I have some reflection questions for you. Just think about these and we'll go from there. So, when you face a conflict, like choosing between studying for an exam or attending a big family event, what usually wins in your culture and why? Do you think that there's a way to honor your group while also taking care of yourself? These are two really great questions to reflect on. The first helps you to identify which kind of cultural mindset do you come from, and the second then helps you to identify if you are someone who comes from a collectivist mindset, then how do you set boundaries for yourself and take care of yourself while still honoring and loving the people around you. And I think on the flip side of that, a good question to ask for individualists might be, what are some ways where I'm prioritizing my own desires above the needs and desires of other people? And how should I change that, if I should change that? And what could community look like if I open myself up in a broader way to relationships and community and seeing the value and importance of relationships and family over personal success. So there is a danger of saying yes to everything. I did mention that at the beginning. So again, this can lead to burnout. If you are always saying yes to everything, eventually you're going to run out of time and you're going to start prioritizing those things that you said yes to. And then if you have in your mind things that are more important or less important, then those will just start to shift in your priority list. And eventually, the things that you don't hold in high priority will just get kicked off of the list. For example, self-care and spending time taking care of yourself, resting, and really reconnecting with your own things that bring you life and joy, whether that's even meeting with people that bring you life or spending time alone. It can look different for different people, but often those fun things just kind of go out the window when we start prioritizing other things. And we can also miss out on what's most important because we are constantly busy. And instead of giving, 100% of ourselves in a certain situation, we're stretched so thin that we can't actually give much of ourselves anywhere. And that can become a huge problem in life. And also, it leads to not being able to be as successful and driven and even to have good character and a good reputation among people, among your community. So many things can be hindered by saying yes too often. And misplaced priorities can also cause guilt and stress. So You feel guilty for saying no, but you feel stressed if you say yes, if you don't have the time for the thing that you're saying yes to. And then when you're actually there in the thing that you said yes to, you can't be present. You might be upset for being there. You might not want to be there at all in the first place. And so you can't show up as your best self because you've said yes to something that you should have actually said no to. Now, we have to be able to figure out some sort of framework in our minds or some sort of, outline of how do we decide what are the things that should be the highest priority for us, and then working down from that. So, we'll take a quick detour from that in a fun little segment. This is another interactive portion for you. So I will set the stage for you. I will explain what is the scenario, and then I'll give you some options, and you can just reflect on your own which choice you would naturally make. How you would prioritize in this situation. It's just like a real life example that you might experience. And then why you want to do things that way or why you think that's important. And you can share which option you chose in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear which is your natural worldview or style of making decisions and how you see the world as either a collectivist or an individualist. But let's just set the scenario and you can go from there. So you're an international student in your second year, and this week you have a big exam on Friday worth 30% of your grade, your best friend's birthday celebration on Thursday night, an important networking event for your career field on Wednesday, and your community, your spiritual community, is also meeting on Wednesday evening. So you only have limited time and energy. You can't give 100% to all of them. So what do you do? What do you choose? So remember, you have an exam, you have a birthday party, you have a networking event, and you also have a small group. So here's your first choice. Number one, focus on academics first. Skip the birthday party and the small group this week. Prioritize exam prep and attend the networking event. Choice number two, choose relationships over events. Go to the birthday celebration because you're going to be deepening your friendship, and it is your best friend, by the way. Still study hard, but skip the networking event this time. Number three, balance academics with your faith. Prioritize your exam prep and your small group fellowship. Miss the birthday and the networking event. Or number four, try to do it all. Attend the networking and the birthday, but sacrifice study time. Risk your exam grade. So here are the different principles that tie to each one of those answers. For the first one, focusing on academics, the principle that might be driving this decision, if you were to choose to go with number one, would be that long-term career and academic foundation is the most important priority in your life. Number two, choosing your relationships over events. So going to the birthday and spending time with your best friend. Your principle might be that friendships are a long-term investment, and that's why it's your highest priority. Number three, balance academics with faith. The principle is spiritual roots and academic excellence both lead to success in your life. So that's why you want to prioritize this as your third option. Or number four, try to do it all. So if you do all of those things and you risk losing your grade or risk your grades, your academic grades, then the principle might be that you're willing to spread yourself too thin, and you should probably reflect on that a little bit. Sometimes we do spread ourselves too thin, and it just works like that in life as well. But knowing moving forward, it might be better to do something else. So now think about which choice you would make and why you made that choice. Is your decision based on urgency, on your values, on your relationships, on your long-term goals? What does that reveal about your priorities as you are right now? Just think about that. So first, identify your core values. What really matters to you right now? And that's going back to those basic principles that we talked about. Is it that your academics are the most important, your relationships are the most important, your spiritual life is the most important, um, or, do you think that you can do it all and carry it all? I tend to fall into the last category too often, where I think that I can manage more than I actually can, and I bite off more than I can chew. But recently, I've started doing my best to kind of reflect. I see a lot of good opportunities. Sometimes I say yes to things and then I realize that I shouldn't have done that. I did that recently with a community development program that I committed to. I really wanted to be involved in because I love what they're doing and it's right down my alley. It's something that I really would love to participate in. However, I also have started many other things in this season of my life that in the long term I think would bring me even more benefit and are more important to me based off of my long-term goals and my personal values. And so because of that, I had to step back and say, I'm so sorry. I don't actually think that I can commit to this right now, but I would love to join you again in the future as I have time. And so sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes we have to recognize that we have chosen to say yes to too many things and to gracefully say no and to step back and really choose to only do the things that we need to prioritize. So I hope by the end of this episode, you'll be able to identify what things in your life you should prioritize and what you might need to say no to. Okay, so there is a principle for helping you to identify those things. You might have seen this before in some self-help videos or something. It's an example that I'll explain to you. I don't have something in my hand, but I'll just explain what it is and I think you'll understand. It's not too hard to imagine. So we have the big rocks first principle. So you might have seen this in a video somewhere. Someone says that these rocks represent certain priorities, the big rocks, and then we have smaller, like pebbles or more like sand, and these are other things in our lives that don't actually hold as high priority, but they're important things. So you have urgent things, important things. And those big rocks represent the urgent things. If you fill up all of your time with the small rocks first, or the important things, but not the urgent things, or the highly valued things, then you won't have room for those big rocks at the top of the jar. If you were like putting these into a jar and imagining this picture. But if you put the big rocks in first and then you fill it up with the important things afterwards, or the small pebbles or the sand that's coming later, then you'll realize that everything can fit into the jar, and that's because you've prioritized things correctly. So you should always do your highest priorities or your urgent things first, and then fill in the rest of your schedule, your calendar, with the other things that are good, they are important, they are necessary, but maybe they're not urgent. So, some examples might be your academics and career versus your relationships versus your faith or your personal well-being, and choosing between a social event and a work deadline and self-care. How do you prioritize those things in your mind? So if your values are that my career is the number one priority to me and my academics, and then after that comes my self-care or things that I find personally important, social outings or friendships or relationships, you might lean towards this way for a season of your life. It's possible. Then you'll know that you have to prioritize your networking event, your work deadline first, and then your social event might come next, and then your self-care would come last. However, I don't highly recommend that kind of setup of priority. Of course, I'm coming from an individualistic mindset, and maybe that's like strongly rooted in my core. But again, if you don't take care of yourself, you'll never be able to take care of other people. And you won't be able to meet your goals and hit your priorities if you push aside the things that actually bring you joy and life and fulfillment and then go after other things. So for me, I would say my faith, my spiritual practices, and my personal well-being is most important. And then second might be my relationships. And then third would be my academics or career. my career path. So for me, that's how I prioritize things in my life. Those are my values. So I will always make time for spiritual practices and my personal growth and development. Then I will make room for friends, in different levels of priority. So this is something else you'll have to sort out in your life. I'll take a side tangent on that in a second, and then career will come after that. So for me, the reason why I chose to um, step back from this community development program, which was really good for my own personal development and career path and all of those things, was because I had things that had to do with spiritual practices and my developing friendships and relationships that took higher priority because I'm building community and committed to several other types of groups and things. And I found that as more important to me than this community development cohort that I was signed up for. So that's why it was heavy with me. I knew it didn't align with my priorities and my values, and I didn't have time for everything. If I did, I would have done all of them, but I didn't have time for everything. So, the side tangent I was talking about is just figuring out how to prioritize your social life and your friendships as well. So, figuring out for yourself, what does it look like? What types of friendships and relationships do you have and do you want? I always highly suggest having at least one or two close friends, even as an introvert or an extrovert. Just have those one or two close people to you, apart from your spouse or your partner or whoever or your family. That's like a family relationship. That's different. But in friendship, having one or two really close people that you can share almost anything with or anything with is really valuable, and you can prioritize time with those friends as needed, as necessary. And then as you grow in building other types of relationships, you can have career-based relationships. So that's just like your social network, and then also relationships that might turn into close friendships or relationships with people that you just want to go do fun things with, and you don't actually have to have that deep of a relationship with them. There are all types of people, all types of relationships, and we need all of them in our lives. So just kind of sort it out in your mind, or you can make a list. Sometimes I'll do this, like if you have a middle circle, that's your inner circle, your closest friends, write those people's names, and then in the next circle would be the next out closest to them, and then outside of that, even less close to those people, if that makes sense. Um, and so you can prioritize your time with your relationships in that way. Now we have some practical tools and strategies aside from what I just threw at you. So, just for your own weekly reflection, a homework challenge I can give to you is to write down your top three priorities and ask yourself, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? So if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? Because every choice is making an opposite choice, and even inaction is an action. So for the example that I gave earlier, if I say yes to this community development cohort that I want to participate in, it will give me these things. It will give me some community development experience. It will open up my career network a little bit wider, my social network in the career space a little bit wider. But I will say no to building deep relationships with people that I care a lot about, or with letting go of spiritual practices that are really important in my life. And I can't say no to those things because those are my top priorities. So that's kind of an example of what that can look like. So write your top three priorities and then what you're saying no to, and what you're saying yes to, and how that pans out in your life. You'll have to learn how to set boundaries with people and how to say no graciously. So, depending on the situation, I gave you an example earlier of how you can say no to something that maybe you've already committed to and now you need to step back from. Or if it's like maybe someone that invited you to come over and you don't actually have time, or they might not be someone that you really want to build a close relationship with, you can determine how far you want to go in the relationship and if you want to say yes at all to spending time with them. But maybe, a kind way would just be like explaining that you have other things going on, whatever your high priorities are. So if it is like your career is a higher priority than this particular person, I have a lot of network events going on right now, and I'm really prioritizing those things because it's going to impact my future and it's really important to me. But I really appreciate you reaching out, and I hope to see you again soon in wherever you met them at, if it was a social event or something. Um, and just make time to spend time with people in groups that are not as close to you, and then the people that you actually want to set aside time for and book in your schedule, then you can do so. Um, Schedule buffer zones to avoid overload. So this is a great tip as you're writing out your weekly schedule and you're prioritizing these things and these times. You can have an empty block in your schedule where if anything comes up, you can fill that with whatever. So I used to do this a lot, and I need to get back in the habit of doing it more regularly. I don't have as much space in my schedule, and of course, you have to make intentional effort to put this space in your schedule and to not overload it with other things. But what I would do is just set aside an empty space at the beginning of my day, and I would go somewhere during that time and if someone wanted to meet with me, I had free time, we could meet there. Or if you do it in the afternoon or something, someone wants to meet with you, you already have space in your schedule to do that. If you have a last minute meeting for work, you have space in your schedule for that. If nothing comes up and no one needs you and you don't have any like work that needs to be done or other things, then you can focus on self-care and you can focus on the things that bring you joy. Right now, I'm trying to prioritize, aside from my health and fitness that I talked about last time, um, doing the things that I really love. There are certain things, hobbies of mine that I used to really enjoy, and they make me feel like myself. And so I'm trying to incorporate those a little bit more regularly into my weekly schedule. Things like reading books or listening to audiobooks, painting, drawing, doing something creative, writing, things like that. So you can write a list of those types of hobbies or things that you enjoy, things that bring you life. And then when you have that free spot in your schedule, then you already have time booked in for you to do that thing. Okay, we are now coming to the end of our episode. We're wrapping up here and now. And I just want to encourage you that, again, you're human. You can't do everything, and that's totally okay. It's just helpful to process through these things and learn how to prioritize life correctly or in a way that's more manageable for you than just going off of impulse or the way that your mind is originally wired or whatever. And you'll see the fruit of this as you go forward in your life, as you prioritize different things, you'll be able to see growth. Because if you don't take the time to intentionally sort this out, things will overwhelm your schedule. It's just inevitable to happen, and you won't have the control over your schedule that you need to be able to grow as a person. Whether it's as a person in your relationships, as a person in your career, as a person just individually in your spiritual practices, whatever that looks like, you need to take the initiative to not let things just happen to you, but figure out the best way to manage everything together. It's like I said, kind of piggybacking off of discipline. It's the next step of discipline or tied hand in hand with discipline. Discipline is choosing what matters most and not just doing more. So sometimes we have this value in our minds that if we're busy and we're doing a lot of things, that's better than if we're not doing anything. But actually, that's not true. Sometimes we need seasons where we slow down, and sometimes we need seasons where we push really hard. And unless you reflect on these things, you won't realize what season are you in and how should you pursue your life in this moment. So it's really important to think about these things. Small, consistent decisions will shape your long-term growth. That's what I was kind of mentioning before, that making these decisions and taking the intentional effort, you will see change, you will see growth in your life as a person, in your career, in your relationships, and you'll be much more at peace because you'll be able to fit all of the things that you need to into your life, into your schedule, and you won't have the things that are so important overflowing out of your jar of life, like we talked about in that description, that image before. So I hope that you learned a lot from this episode. I know it was a little long, a little lengthy, but I love being able to talk about these topics. I hope that it helps you to kind of figure out what you should say yes to, what you should say no to as you are preparing to come overseas, to come to the US, or you are already here and trying to sort out how to figure out social life, academics, clubs, all of these things, personal time, family. There's so much that can take up the time in your schedule. And you just need a little bit of time to set aside to be intentional, to be disciplined, and to sort it out. And then once you have it sorted, it's sorted. And you can come back around every few months or so and readjust, evaluate your priorities and see if things are still holding true to the values that you have. And if not, then you can always change. We are people who are growing and changing every day, and that's a great thing. So this week, I just challenge you again to write down your top 3 priorities or your top 3 non-negotiables and use those as filters for your decision making. And if I could ask you to reflect on this one question, it would be, what's one area that you need to say no to this week so that you can say yes to what really matters? Okay, namaste Satyaru. I hope that as you go this week making your decisions, that you will go with peace and joy, that all of your time will be filled with life-giving things that are going towards your values and your priorities, and that you'll go in community and with grace.